If you have rheumatoid arthritis and you have a lot of questions around the underlying cause of this disease and where the inflammation is coming from and the different mechanisms that we can put in place to be able to drive down symptoms, then this episode is for you. I'm about to share it with you right now. It is with a person called John, who I actually met around 10 years ago. And John's been following our program for a long time. But before that, throughout his entire 40 plus years of inflammatory arthritis, he suffered a lot of joint damage and he was on steroids for a long time. But the great news is that he's been able to normalize in his inflammatory markers and finally, after having the disease for so long, be able to bring his symptoms into a consistent, steady, low state. And on this episode, John had a lot of questions for me. And if you're curious about all of the approaches to this disease, the science behind it, then this episode, which goes in multiple directions, will be one that you will love. So sit back and enjoy my interview with John. Welcome back to the Rheumatoid Solutions podcast. My guest today is John. This isn't the first time I've met John. Around 10 years ago or thereabouts, we're trying to recall, I hosted an event in Anaheim in Los Angeles. And at the time, John and I got together for a little one-to-one afterwards, and we spoke about his situation, and we built a nice rapport on that session. And now all these years later, John has been still in watching from a distance, I guess you'd say, our social media, our webinars, and all things that we're putting out online, and has reached out and has said, let's have another chat. This time, let's do a podcast together. And we want to go through John's story. John's had inflammatory arthritis for 46 years. And what we felt would be super helpful would be to talk today about a lot of the directions that he went on that weren't helpful. Some of those lifestyle, some of those other than lifestyle, so that it can serve as a warning to those of you who have not had that duration of time with this condition to be able to interpret some better ways forward. And so what we wanted to refer to this interview as in advance here is how to succeed the hard way. Okay, so that's what we're going to go through today with John. He's a wonderful, very, very sharp, intelligent man, 46 years of inflammatory arthritis with so many lessons to be able to share with us. So John, thanks so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me, Clint. What you are presenting through the Patterson program is so vital for so many, and I really want to come in and support what you're presenting.
When people hear reactive arthritis in the medical community, they shift towards thinking that it's something that may be able to therefore go again as quickly as it came on. That was not your disease at all. You noticed decade after decade of progression, right? Which would, I don't know about disqualify reactive arthritis, but certainly be a morphing away from that into more of a classic rheumatoid sort of situation, because your disease just went on and on for decades, correct?
It did. And it's hard to say. I just know that it was after that episode of food poisoning that I know my body, there was something off, So I know this too. What's really interesting, I'd love to talk to you more about this. My body always responded well to minocycline. I know that you're not an advocate of minocycline at all, but I know that minocycline can work well in certain cases of reactive arthritis. But your teaching has convinced me that it's not the way you want to obtain a happy microbiome, not alter it through any type of antibiotics,
Yeah, so let's chat about that for a second. So the low dose antibiotic therapy, or the Brown protocol that you're talking about, yes, that sort of went out of favor maybe a decade and a half ago in terms of the rheumatology clinics. When I first was diagnosed 2006, there was even my own rheumatologist saying that he might put me on low dose antibiotics in parallel to methotrexate. And I was dumbfounded because it was antibiotics that I had recently taken on my trip to the Middle East as an entertainer that I now, in hindsight, believe brought on the disease. But at the time, even with my naivety, I said, hang on, I've actually been taking the exact drug that he recommended, which was doxycycline. I said, I've been actually taking that a few months ago, I took that for 3 or 4 months because I went to the Middle East. And neither of us drew any conclusions from that. But of course, I was taking that same drug for 5 years for acne as a teenager. But to come back to the low dose Brown protocol antibiotic, the feeling was, and the doctor at the time told me, we don't know why. He literally said, we don't know why the antibiotic may help, but it may help. I believe what's going on is that the antibiotic may be taking out some of our good bacteria and some of the bad bacteria. Even though it's a very selective and low dose antibiotic, we're still going to have some collateral damage to the good guys. But if it's some of the pathogens are proving to be quite problematic, then you may have a net benefit of slight improvement to the patient.
Yeah, I remember your analogy. It's a monkey with a machine gun. Yeah. But if it's killing the good bacteria as well, where is that ultimately going to take us? It's a fascinating, the whole discussion of what is actually triggering this disease in our body when immunology is such a complex topic. Could it be a mycoplasma? That is fascinating. I believe maybe that was a part where the cellless virus, whatever it is getting inside our cells, or reprogramming of our cells. But here's the point, Clint, I'm sure you agree on. Regardless, and this is the question I have, it's our only hope is to rebalance that microbiome in our bodies. That is what's so essential, and also to avoid toxins that will overload our systems. And more and more research is coming out now that says that 70%, and even doctors, scientists at Johns Hopkins, they're admitting and fully advocating the concept that 70% of our immune system is found in our gut. They call it the second brain. So my question to you is, if that's the case, and that's being pretty much accepted throughout the scientific community, why is it that in rheumatology or any autoimmune disease, they're still not addressing this aspect of immunology? I don't understand.
It will come. It is. Keep in mind how expensive it is to develop drug treatments and to run clinical trials. It's absolutely phenomenally expensive. And therefore, there takes time for the research to undergo to the extent that it's not only produced the first time, but then reproduced by another research group and then a third group. And then they do pilot studies and then a full clinical trial, double-blind placebo. I mean, it takes years and years and years for where we are today to become something that down the track can be then administered by a rheumatologist in a clinic on the corner of where you live. And where it becomes a little bit then more interesting is that what would that thing look like that's administering to you if it actually can be done with food?
Can I share with you? Because my dream is that in 20 years, you'll go into the rheumatologist, he'll take a fecal sample, he'll determine the imbalances in the species of your microbiome, and then suggest a specific food or supplements that would reestablish that balance. I believe that's what's ultimately going to happen, but I just wish things would hurry up because I know people are suffering. I have another question for you because I really just want to learn but I'll share my story as well. Do you believe that someone can find full healing from this spectrum of diseases of rheumatology by only using Western medicine without implementing lifestyle changes?
Sometimes, yes. The word healing, though, I would substitute with asymptomatic status, right? So we've had people on our podcast, people we've helped inside our coaching program, who've described that prior to working with us, they felt fine in terms of their symptoms, but they were taking the allopathic meds, right? They're taking a Humira or an Enbrel or a methotrexate to a lesser extent. Mostly it's the biologics that can enable people to become really symptom-free. And then they want to rely less on this and find out how they can put things into their lifestyle to be able to, what I call put pillars in place to be able to support their health when the drug is tapered. Yeah.
Uh,
And so to specifically answer your question, are there people who are asymptomatic, living normal lives, happy without any kind of feeling like they have RA with medications alone? Yes, it does happen. But I tend to feel, and this is my personal opinion, that it happens more when people are taking the more, advanced technology kind of drugs like, your biologics or infusions and stuff. There was a study back around 2008, I think, where they had people on all sorts of different disease-modifying drugs, including steroids and painkillers, meloxicams, ibuprofen. And the study followed the pathway over a few years of people who are on all different combinations of disease-modifying drugs, steroids, and painkillers. And the researcher, and I remember the exact quote, it proved difficult to suppress inflammatory markers in patients. This is with all of those drugs, okay? And this is why I feel that the predominant sample of the community who are doing well on medications alone, who are carefree about their lifestyle, are on more of a biologic infusion kind of treatment plan.
Well, and the question is, long term, 5-10 years down the line, I'm not sure if they have enough studies to reveal, but will there be side effects that will ultimately occur with these biologics, or, will the disease just find another way of manifesting because you're not really treating the imbalance? These are kind of unknowns. You're not really getting to the root cause of, again, what I believe is a very strong imbalance of the microbiome. Do you agree?
I do agree, and then I'll also talk about the root cause in a minute. So we're going on interesting tangents here on this chat, and we'll get to your story in a minute. Hope people are finding this interesting, irrespective of that. So first of all, do the biologics ultimately have an expiry date, I guess, or are there reasons why only that alone shouldn't be embraced? I've got absolutely a neutral opinion on the approach of the biologic pathway for people who are in pain. I mean, that just makes sense if you want to stop joint progression, joint degradation. I have no qualms whatsoever, and in fact, encourage people sometimes to go down a pathway to take sensible long-term medication. And the question becomes, only when someone doesn't want to do that, what are they doing instead? You've got to do something to stop the joint inflammation, because the heat, redness, swelling in a joint that goes on month after month is leading to reduced spacing in the cartilage, in the joint, I should say, reduced cartilage, and permanent damage. So we have the option these days, of which you didn't have when you were going through your early years of inflammatory arthritis, and we'll talk about the treatments that you went through. You didn't have access to the likes of, these TNF alphas and interleukin-6 medication. You didn't have access to that. People who do should be talking to their rheumatologist and finding out all of their treatment plan options. And if they want to also look at lifestyle changes in parallel, they should be aware that that can be immensely helpful too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, in terms of the underlying cause, we've spent a bit of time talking microbiome, but there are three aspects to this. Microbiome is only one. A microbiome system, which is the balance of microbes in your mouth and also in your colon. Both of these areas of the body need to be optimized. Then there is the antioxidant system, which is driven primarily by glutathione, which is our master antioxidant. And then the third part of this is our nervous system, which is the balance between when we spend most of our time, are we in typically a fight or flight, or are we in a parasympathetic nervous system, which is a rest and digest? And that is dictated by heart rate variability. So we've got microbiome, we've got antioxidant system, in brackets, glutathione, and we've got nervous system, in brackets, heart rate variability. So when we're talking about trying to get someone so well, and I mean, they have to be so well that they can show up to their rheumatologist and say, hey, check it out. Doctor, with your permission, can we look at my blood markers? Okay, good. Can we look at maybe a drug taper? And there's just in such good health, the rheumatologist can say, you know what? Why don't we explore this a little bit at a time? We'll keep an eye on your bloods, keep coming in regularly, and let's just slowly go down this pathway together. Only after they've put in place these foundational pillars of health. Yeah.
I need to lift you up because you continue to learn. Even the whole concept of the microbiome in the mouth is a new concept I haven't heard you teach. But I love one of the teachings I heard on your YouTube videos is like, look, you've got to take charge of this disease. You cannot depend on the doctor. They're too busy. They're overwhelmed for whatever reason. You have to be the coach, the leader, the initiator. And along those lines, we need to learn. And see, I didn't have access. I'd have to go to the library and do microfiche. I was only 19 years old. I was overwhelmed, scared to death. I trusted the doctors wholly. That's all I knew, you know. But nowadays, with this access to information, there's empowerment in knowledge. And for them, you know, especially to learn from people like you that have done the work and the research, but always question and expand. But see, here's my question too with medications, because back to my story as well. Wasted a lot of time on gold shots, which just seems like witchcraft now. They lowered my hemoglobin, exhausted me, did no good at all. Switched to penicillamine, which again just made me sick. And then I was just kind of done. I was eating a lot of salad in the cafeteria, so I started feeling better that way. But back to school, my knee swelled up again, so I started taking prednisone. 10 milligrams only, which was totally prescribed. But I know as well, that was a toxic dose for me, not an overwhelming dose. I had also gotten a pulse earlier in the year. So it's all cumulative again, similar to minocycline you've mentioned. So I know what happened is that my hips were destroyed. I had avascular necrosis of the femoral heads. So here we go. In 6 months, I'm trying to get through college and I was in a wheelchair and then I needed hip replacements. And the journey just gets really arduous from there. I don't even want to share it all because it's so devastating. But my question is, and this is my big concern, and you've mentioned the dangers of minocycline and how it can really throw off the microbiome. You've mentioned the dangers of all of the NSAIDs and how they really can just tear up the gut. But as well, to me, the big danger is prednisone, taking it long-term, any dose over 10 milligrams. If you're at 5, it's probably a little safer, but even then, they're giving these packets of prednisone down where they blast you and then bring it down after a month. But my big fear with that as well is that people might be getting addicted to it and not be able to decrease the dose. I'd like to hear your thoughts. And again, for the viewers to be aware that isn't it true that a lot of these medications that doctors are giving could perhaps be doing more harm than good?
I don't want to get drawn into that specific answer exactly. I think that generally doctors are wanting to help people get out of pain. They want to stop the radiographic evidence of progression in joints that you can see on x-rays. And so to achieve that, they have a spectrum of medications from which they can choose. Some of them I personally categorize as short-term medications. Those are non-steroidal anti-inflammatories and steroids, proton pump inhibitors. Okay, these drugs tend to have a poor risk to benefit profile long term. The words long term are essential. Okay. And this isn't controversial. If you look into the College of Rheumatology guidelines, which are put together by an expert panel of esteemed rheumatologists who get together every few years. I don't know if they do it virtually. They sit around a big table, and what they do is they say, okay, guys, a few years have passed since we've recently put the guidelines together. What's changed? What do we want to modify? And then they come up with a refinement every few years of these guidelines. And these guidelines clearly say that to speak of steroids, for example, that steroids should be administered for the shortest possible time in the lowest possible dose. Okay, so we take Clint out of this. It doesn't matter what I think. What the rheumatology guidelines say is shortest possible time, lowest possible dose. However, there is a place for steroids when used in the guidelines for short term in certain conditions where we're waiting on a disease modifying drug to begin to work or in between treatments, et cetera, et cetera. And the guidelines is where everyone can go and download. You, John, and the audience you can Google it yourself. Just type in American College of Rheumatology guidelines. I think the last one was done around 2021 or 2022. They'll do another one probably in the coming year or two. They also, by the way, now have some American College of Rheumatology guidelines lifestyle interventions. It's the first time they've ever put this together. There is an A++ absolute highest priority recommendation around resistance training physical therapy for patients with RA. Now, coming from the medical community to put a AAA++ recommendation around physical therapy and movement totally supports what we do in our coaching program, which is prioritize this and make sure that joints, when they're inflamed and swollen and stiff, don't just sit there in that uncontrolled state. We've got to get movement through. Anyway, so do the meds ever create more harm than good? I would say that if we're using short-term medications for long-term purposes, that you've then got a mismatch between the intention of which the drug was prescribed. The rheumatologist should be consulted around whether or not steroids should be continued long-term at a low dose. And there's a lot of debate in the medical literature around whether 5 milligram of steroid taken long-term is beneficial versus not having it, because in one hand, it could help to prevent joint damage. But on the other hand, there are published side effects that we're aware of with steroids that mean that the College of Rheumatology guidelines say shortest possible time, lowest possible dose. So it's definitely not my, all I can say is there's the science, there's what the studies are saying. Here are the guidelines. And we all should be looking at that. And then, my area of expertise is how can we do everything in our power to minimize symptoms so that not only do we not need to show up with our tail between our legs to the rheumatologist, but so that we can also not even need 10 stupid supplements and all these other weird and wonderful things we need to be doing, but just to live the cleanest, healthiest, simplest life we can with the least amount of external interventions required, the way that a healthy person does without RA.
Yeah, well, and thank you for sharing all that. I haven't been to a rheumatologist in years, but it's nice to know that perhaps the collective consciousness of the medical community is evolving to accept more of your teachings. And again, I can't commend you enough how much of an inspiration you've been, that you are the voice of the healthy lifestyle necessary for autoimmune diseases. And you're one of the few that I know, or the only one that's actually suffered with the disease and found answers. And that just makes you much more credible. I always think about your cherry incident and how that incident in many ways saved and altered the lives of so many, because without that, you wouldn't have been able to see the correlation between food and arthritis, and then being able to find, okay, well, what foods can I eat? And where I'm most inspired by you, and I think you were ahead of your time, and you were the very first voice of fats or oils. And even today, everyone's, well, healthy fats, healthy oil. It can be a bit of an oxymoron. And nowadays, even the carnivores are like, oh, seed oils, they're no good. Whereas when you first came out with that 10 years ago, you're the only one. And I found that a very unique teaching, but very true. I don't know if you've seen Jeff Novick's lecture on olive oil. Olive oil, that's healthy. It's not. It's got nothing beneficial. But all of these oils really seem to be a problem. Or let me put it this way, to minimize the amount of oils that you consume really, really goes a long way to helping you heal or stop or the progression of rheumatoid arthritis. I'm sure you concur.
Yeah. So it used to be all about what we could find was very little back when I was suffering. You know, I'm 19. I'll be 20 years with this disease in a few months.
Wow.
And so that one was purely anecdotal when it began, but I knew that every time I would eat something stir-fried, I was extremely suffering the next day. That one came out, as you say, extremely unique to my little world of trial and error, that then I started to push forward, because when I started working with others, I noticed the same thing. And I quickly became very passionate about that, because I was finding no exceptions. It was 100%. So if you're not seeing any exceptions at all, you start to develop confidence around it pretty quick. And then it wasn't until the last 4 or 5 years, I think, when I started to understand, and this is where the antioxidant system comes in. It's like glutathione versus and cooked oils, because of the nature of destroying the molecular structure of oils when they are heated, means that they generate a vast amount of free radicals. And so what's happening as we're consuming cooked oils is they have to find electrons from somewhere. And the first point of contact they have is through the digestive tract. And so if you're losing electrons from your digestive tract, they're being taken from the cell membranes. And if your cells are losing electrons, you're losing cells. Your gut layer is only one cellular layer thick. And so unless you've got a large amount of antioxidant defenses, then that's not going to look good for your intestinal tract. So do I still promote absolutely no oils? No, it's more of a refined and evolved understanding of this these days. What we do these days is that we want everyone to start with a low-fat diet. The body can just settle down a little bit inflammation-wise and be able to digest some very simple, easy, low-fat plant-based foods. Then with time, the fat content goes up, and the fat content eventually can become quite substantial with people eating nuts and seeds and avocados. And right, we get there eventually, but we have to graduate to that by going through, it's like year 1 of university, year 2, or college, if you like, year 3. You can't jump straight to graduation. You've got to go through the process. And then fat tolerance increases as we develop the ability to produce enzymes and bile acid, and we develop the microbes to break down higher fat foods, and we develop the protective lining of mucus on our colon, so that we aren't migrating lipopolysaccharide, which is an endotoxin, into the bloodstream, which is fat soluble. Okay, so the endotoxin is fat soluble, which means the fatty acids moving into the bloodstream can assist in the migration of that endotoxin. A little bit too scientific for us, but what I want to say is that these days, I take a little olive oil. It's a blend with the omega-3 that I have. So I don't seek olive oil for olive oil. Olive oil has powerful lipid antioxidants. That's fat protecting antioxidants, and therefore they're helpful to protect the omega-3 fats from oxidation when they enter into our body. So I use olive oil as a chaperone or a bodyguard for the omega-3 that I supplement to optimize my omega-6 to 3 ratio.
You're quite the scientist. You really have evolved that way. I mean, very impressive. But I'm sure you would agree that any cooked oil is one to avoid 100%. True?
Correct. Correct. And the other argument, of course, just because if anyone's fascinated by this, the complete argument here is people are also concerned about the balance of omega-6 to 3. And when we're talking seed oils, they're only omega-6. And so all you're doing is you're then promoting not only pure oxidized fat, but you're also then promoting an arachidonic pathway. Again, you drop quick into the science here, but it's just not an anti-inflammatory strategy to do that. So for people just trying to get a simple takeaway here, a little bit of unheated olive oil after you have rebalanced your health is okay. All right?
Yeah. Would you say that is that heated oils are probably one of the very worst things that anyone could ingest for rheumatoid.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow, without even a
If
pause.
if I'm getting off an aeroplane and someone says, "Oh, I've got rheumatoid or something," and they wanted to know one or two, three
Yeah.
things, I would say, never consume cooked oils of any kind. Doesn't
Mhm.
matter if it's a high heat temperature threshold of coconut oil or whether or not it's just a healthy perceived olive oil, whatever. You're cooking the oil, you're going to create free radicals, and it's the free radicals that we're concerned about. Right? So, second of all, eat salad with your meals. Okay. And number three, exercise and become stronger than you've been in 10 years. Those would be the three
Well,
things.
along those lines, I wanted to share with you. Well, if I know we're kind of winding down, but I really wanted to give a shout out to your viewers and to urge them to take this disease very, very seriously. I hope and pray you don't have the kind of joint damage that I've had to undergo, because it really does make life very, very arduous. If you don't make it a priority, the disease will make it a priority for you. And I know maybe some of your viewers, look, I've got family, I've got work, I can't, but you've got to really take care of your health. My hands are, if the desire of this disease is ultimately to turn us into a statue, that would be the long-term result, which has largely happened to me. I don't want, with your program and with knowledge and discipline and application somewhat of Western medicine, you can be victorious, but even if you're not, and you have been challenges, you can still come back. Like my SED rate right now is 2. I'm pain free. My energy levels are fine. I'm independent. I feel great. But I can't move around. I limp. I can't walk long distances. My ankles are kind of fusing out. It's just really hard to let the disease become advanced, but with you give hope, and can I show you something to wind down a really good meal? I'd love for you to, kind of discern it and see what you think, because this is kind of like my go-to meal now. Okay, what I do, I thought your viewers would enjoy this. I have my rice cooker, and at the bottom of my rice cooker I put mixed beans. I have different types and then on top of that I like to put brown rice, and that cooks really well. And then I think of you always, your voice, look, greens, you got to push the greens, so I make this conglomerate of the I'll show you, hold on. I have the beans and rice that come out of the rice cooker, and put that in. And then I always add the greens, where this time I have cilantro. I've added green onion. I throw some walnuts in there. I throw raisins. What else? For later I have when I'm ready to eat it, I'm going to put some organic cranberries. Usually I like some type of tomatoes as well. And then, because I think too, it is, push the greens, but also push the variety to make sure that all the different microbiome. I love this. I don't know if you have your go-to meal, but that I could eat it, and I often do eat it every day. And after I do, I feel amazing. I feel energized, but not tired. I feel satiated. And I feel it's almost like my microbiome is shouting out, like, thank you, we can work with this, So I wanted to share something practical with your viewers. And honestly, it only takes me about 10 minutes to prepare. I can eat it hot or cold. With the rice cooker, it makes it all very easy, Any thoughts on that? I imagine you love it.
I love it. Absolutely love it. As soon as you're mixing beans and rice together, you've got a phenomenal yin and yang combination of protein and all of the micro and macronutrients that you could want. And then you put on top the leafy greens, you put on top some of your cranberries just to give it that nice sweeter taste. I mean, you've got something there that I can see you could eat really often. Fantastic. No wonder your SED rates too.
Yeah.
If you could go back in time, what would be some of the things that you would change about how you went about your disease management? And of course, all of us can answer this question passionately. All of us wish we had have done things differently. What would have been some of your sort of different decisions?
More, well, as we discussed, more living food, more fasting, consuming only water, making sure I was getting sufficient rest. But the biggest one as well is to not try to live a normal life. as much as I needed to pull back and really take care of myself. I was a teacher. I know you studied physics. I studied mathematics. I love teaching, but it was too much. The stress level, it was killing. It almost killed me. It destroyed my knees. I had to have you know what I mean? To really make your health and your rest. I would tell myself, look, you got to manage this, and then make this disease your first priority. Because, for example, I'm left-handed. My elbow is similar. I know you had left elbow. I always think of you like if you had gone down my path. We have similar journeys, but you obviously found healing. And my elbow is limited now. I can't bend it. It was destroyed because of teaching, and it's not worth it. You know what I mean? My obviously inflammation, and then it attacks the areas oftentimes that you're using. I guess the biggest one, Clint, would be to make your health a priority. You know, you have to do that with this disease, or like I say, it'll force you to do it itself. You know.
Yeah, and this comes up a lot when we're talking about, whether or not people want to work with us or not on like some calls that we do. And some people are like thinking about renovating their kitchen versus like investing in 6 months of having our coaching team completely revolutionize their health and their approach to this disease. And sometimes it's weird that like if you were teaching and then you're thinking, well, if I was going to make all these lifestyle changes, it might impact my momentum with my teaching, or it might slow me down, or whatever. But the truth is that a short-term adjustment of reallocation of priorities, which only has a steep learning curve for about a month, right? It only takes you a month to work out how to eat the right foods and how to consistently allocate about 30 or 40 minutes a day to exercise. That's all it is. And then it's easy to take a few supplements and to reduce your stress once you start to feel good. I mean, you're motivated, you're enthusiastic to do these things. It's only a steep learning curve for a month, but that can change the direction of the future so enormously that little change of direction over that month, that can be like phenomenal for your outcomes in the future.
To the point that even people could literally live normal. See, because I've never had that. I've had to just suffer and work through things a lot on my own. But to the point that you believe people can, with your program and combined with Western medicine, they can go on to live basically normal lives.
We see them regularly, John. Yeah. Yeah. I think the unfortunate history that you've experienced is, how long did you do steroids for?
Gosh, about 5 years. It took me forever to get off of them,
5 years. And when you came off them, what was next? Did you replace it with anything?
Yeah, I didn't have the knowledge, and I was busy I went back to school, and I'm just busy with life. I don't know even how to access information back then. There was no internet.
Yeah. And then, so you were sort of without any drug, but you'd been on steroids for 5 years. And then, it was probably another 10 years before you and I met in Anaheim. And then now it's another 10 years later. So there is, like, when I see your hands, I see that I believe that more improvements can be done to that. I always believe there's improvements awaiting us, and that we can, with the right approach, create or carve out those improvements that are currently potential improvements, and then move them into reality. And that elbow, like you said, that lost range of motion there, that elbow, I'd be working on a lot of strength building activity through that elbow. Tricep swimming.
I'm always, that's all I can do now.
Yeah.
But and I want to thank you again for being the voice of hope for all of us, but also to lift up your program online. As you mentioned, this is a very lonely disease. And especially when you're starting out, who you talk to, and the forum that you created was so worth it to me. I met so many amazing people that understand, to be able to access your forum and get direct. You're always quick to respond, and to be able to ask your questions, get an immediate answer. That was invaluable for me to build my knowledge, and knowledge is power. I wish I could go back and do things. I know you felt the same way on some areas, but we can only go forward. And again, I'm grateful to at least be free of pain, and we got to count the blessings. And And that's why I wanted to share with you, because I really hope that I can inspire other people to really take this serious and understand and find healing,
In terms of where you think you are now compared to where you have been in terms of struggling in the past, how would you describe those two extremes?
Well, I know there are people, I'm going to say it because I know people feel like when I was at my worst, all I could think about is dying, you know? And now it's like, okay, well, I got things to do today. I got to get out. I got to go shopping. You're living life. And also, okay, what can I do to have fun? I do have some enjoyment in my life. Who can I call? Whereas before I didn't want to talk to anybody, I mean, those are pretty strong extremes, but it's hard not to feel that way when you're completely exhausted and in pain, and it doesn't stop. I know you understand. Shards of glass every day. That's what you have to deal with. That's a hard way to live life.
It is. It is. Which aspects of what you do right now do you feel are most beneficial for you to keep pain away?
Again, your voice has always come in my head because it's diet, isn't it? Like the diet is the queen on the chessboard. Huge. Exercise, maybe like a rook. The king, I mean, that's the disease itself, maybe. Supplements, maybe like a bishop or a rook or yeah, a horse, not yeah. So, and the pawns, I don't know, that could maybe getting into it. Well, and rest is super important. Isn't that another aspect too? Like you've got to figure out how much sleep you need every night, and you've got to make time to get that. That's probably another rook to use the chess analogy. But it's 80-90% diet, Clint, to master this disease. Would you agree with that?
I used to think it was that, and now I think it's more. I mean, now I think it's more a combination of diet, physical therapy, and nervous system optimization. Which is it's because, and the reason I say that is because if I was only allowed to pull the dietary lever with the people that we work with closely, I wouldn't be able to look them in the face and say, we can get you out of this.
Wow.
I need to know that I can use those other levers to help them get their life back. And so that gives you an indication of how much I believe that these other factors need to be gotten right.
I find that fascinating. I've never heard you express or teach that. Or do you have videos out on the neurological aspect of this disease?
Well, here's a study that I like to talk about, and then just through our time limit here, I'm going to have to love you and leave you. A study from 2008 looked at a whole bunch of people who were about to begin Enbrel and Humira, okay? And they measured their heart rate variability. And then after 6 months of the medications, they tested the outcomes of these patients on these medications and compared it to their heart rate variability again. And what they were able to do is use computer analysis and predict, looking at the heart rate variability data at the beginning of the study, as to whether or not those patients would or would not adequately respond to the biologic drugs, meaning that your heart rate variability data is a very high predictor as to whether or not TNF alpha medications are going to work for you. Now, heart rate variability ties directly into information about how stressed you are, your nervous system. So if you're trying to get well and you're taking, and your heart rate variability is in the toilet, we know from that study that those kind of biologic drugs may not be a good fit for you. Well, what about the other meds? We don't know. It was just done on those. Anyway, let's leave it there, John. We went in a different direction. I felt like it became a bit of a science lesson today. I hope you feel like we got a good amount of sharing done on your side.
Well, I love talking to you. I mean, thank you. Keep learning, keep being an advocate and a sound voice of this disease and an inspiration for so many. Please feel free to to edit any and all parts of the video. Whatever, it's fine.
We don't need to edit anything.
We
No.
could easily go on for a couple hours, but I know that you're busy.
I agree. And what we might do, if the audience in the chat, if you've made it this far in this conversation on YouTube, if you in the chat want to hear John ask me questions that he's been curious about, just as he's done on this episode, we can do another episode together because, John, your questions, I'm sure many people have been wondering. And let us know in the comments. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Thank you, John, for being so awesome.
All the best, guys.
Bye for now.